Good afternoon and welcome to day one of the 2022 Governor's Conference on Volunteerism. Volunteerism, the power of collaboration. And thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. Our session today is Senior Volunteers, the Hidden Workforce, and it's presented by one incredible professional staff member and three outstanding volunteers of AARP New Hampshire who live and breathe volunteering and actually walk the talk 24/7, and they have the scars to prove it. Now, did you know that AARP New Hampshire has over 225,000 card-carrying members in the state of New Hampshire? That we are on the front line for our members when it comes to issues that affect them, whether it is federal or state legislation, protecting Medicare and Social Security at all costs, striving to make all New Hampshire towns and cities livable communities, aggressive community and advocacy work, a volunteer-driven speakers bureau which focuses on issues related to the 50+ of age, or we sponsor what we call fun with purpose events, such as our movies for grown-ups, ice cream nights, yoga, and creative feasts, to name a few of the many activities and initiatives we have at AARP New Hampshire. Anyways, if you know someone who is 50+ of age and would like more information on AARP New Hampshire, call the number that will be given at the end of the presentation. Believe me, you will not be disappointed. Okay, in the next 75 minutes, you will hear and hopefully share with us what is unique about recruiting, training, or retaining, motivating, engaging, and retaining your senior volunteers. What barriers must be overcome for the senior volunteer in your organization, and the benefits to the senior volunteer and to your organization. At the end of the presentation, we're going to take questions and comments. If you want, you can jump into the chat room anytime and ask a question or a comment. I need to know, this is a live show. Are we doing the cloud now, or are we bypassing the cloud?
We are doing the cloud now. I will go ahead and share the results that are coming in.
Thank you.
Second. You're welcome.
I love live presentations.
All right, there we go. So as people are adding their words, we can see it kind of fill up here.
I love all the positive statements. Thank you. Okay, what do you say? Why don't we start the presentation? And we're going to start this morning with one of our outstanding AARP New Hampshire volunteers, Iris Altilio. Iris.
Thank you that much. Hi everyone, my name is Iris, and I started volunteering probably as a kid in Girl Scouts and did it all the way through high school. Once I got my driver's license, I pursued my passion of volunteering with community theater, and life kind of got in my way and I stopped volunteering. Moved to New Hampshire in 2014. I didn't know anybody here except my husband who came with me. I had a lot of time on my hands, so I started volunteering. It gave me opportunities to continue to do meaningful work, to meet people, to maintain my skills and to learn new skills, to pursue my passions, basically to fill a void in my life. I volunteer, there's a statistic that says 72% of volunteers usually volunteer for one organization. Most of the people I know don't fit that statistic. I'm one of them. I volunteer in multiple capacities at AARP. Right now, I'm the coordinator for the Speakers Bureau. I volunteer with Ollie. I'm a Granite State Ambassador, the checklist supervisor. And I volunteered for over 6 years at the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness until they became too big and decided that what I did needed to be an employee. So now I'm an employee part-time. What I'm going to present today, and I'm going to be talking pretty much on recruiting and training. It's based on my experiences, my observations of seniors, as well as articles that AARP's written, other trusted sources, and a project I did for Ollie called Approaches to Building Continuity to assure we had seniors, volunteers who could continue doing the roles that the volunteers needed to do. But first, let's review what we're going to talk about. Next slide, please. Okay, as Marc said in his introduction, today's presentation is about volunteers age 50 and over, what's unique about them, and why it's important that we consider these unique characteristics when we're recruiting, training, motivating, engaging, and retaining our senior volunteers. Now, we don't have a good term for what to call ourselves. Are we older adult volunteers, senior volunteers, 50+ volunteers? If any of you have suggestion, put it in the chat and we'll welcome them, and maybe we'll find one that's better than what we have been using. This is what we're going to cover. I'm going to start by explaining the terms that are in our title. Then we're going to start the discussion on what's unique about our volunteers and why it matters. Then we'll go into specifics. I'm going to talk about recruiting and training. Ashley's going to talk about information on motivating, engaging, and retaining our senior volunteers. Volunteerism among seniors is relatively low compared to other groups. So Mary's going to talk to us about barriers, why seniors don't volunteer. And Marc is going to discuss the benefits to your organization of using senior volunteers, what the volunteers get from you. And he's going to finish up with the intergenerational volunteer experience. But before we get started on these topics, we want to find out a little bit about who's out there in the audience. So could I have the next slide and the first poll, please? Okay, so first we want to know your involvement with volunteers. So please respond to the poll, and when Carrie sees a good number of responses, she'll pop up the answers.
We'll wait just a few more seconds here. Almost everybody has responded. Okay. So let's see, our question is, please indicate your involvement with volunteers. And paid volunteer manager, 43% of you have some experience there. Unpaid volunteer manager, 13%. And work with volunteers in my job is 39%. And there are just 4% of you that said none, just interested in the topic.
And nobody who's a volunteer, basically. Okay. So we can go to the next slide now, and we have a second poll. Our second poll is going to ask you, well, this one may not be relevant because you all did not indicate your volunteers. So we'll pop it up, but we're going to give it a very short amount of time to see if anybody volunteers, and if so, about how many hours. All right, we're getting quite a few answers. And Carrie, when you take it down, you can just share the results and everybody could see them, because there's a lot of answers. That way you don't have to read them.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm actually
all right.
passport.
So let's,
I can see weekend.
that's assuming I know how to share these poll results now, Iris. I know I can see them. There we go, share.
Okay, so we can see the results, and we can see that in this group, the majority are less than 5 hours, but it seems like a lot of you are either paid or volunteer managers. You have a lot, and you have a lot going on in your lives. Okay, we can stop sharing, and we can go to our third and final poll. And next slide, please. Wait, did you go there already? Nope, next slide. Okay, so our final poll is, when were you born? And we're seeing the poll, so can you just pop in those answers?
Let's see if I can find it.
Okay, we've got almost everybody responded.
Yep.
Okay, so we're seeing the results now. And we're seeing, well, just take note that we're covering basically all the ranges that I asked for, with the highest percentage from 1946 to 1980. So we're going to talk about who those folks are in a moment. Okay, we can stop sharing the poll. And I'm going to say, wonder if you wondered why I asked this question. So let's go to the next slide and I'll tell you why. Next slide, please. That's one slide too many, I think, isn't it? There you go, thanks. All right, so the reason why we asked this question is because a lot has changed. And these are just a few of the things: globalization, air travel, technology, the distance you live from your family, medical advances, shifts in the business and industry, women in the workforce, the concept of retirement. As we continue through our presentation, think about these things, about how all these changes have impacted us. And now let's go to our next slide. Okay, our topic is senior volunteering. Senior volunteers, the hidden workforce. First, let's define volunteer, although you probably all know it. From the Cambridge English Dictionary, a volunteer is a person who does something, especially helping other people, willingly, not being paid and not being forced to do it. But volunteering is work, it's a job. It's just the difference is there's no monetary compensation. Someone once said to me, this is where our title came from, she never realized the hidden workforce of volunteers who helped sustain our businesses and organizations. There was a 2019 census, 2019 population survey report that said there's about 78 million people who volunteered in 2018, with an estimated 5.8 billion hours and an average economic value of $147 billion. And from Volunteer Hub, we learned that about 31% of baby boomers and 25% of the silent generation volunteer each year. You need volunteers. They're not a nice to have, they're a must have. They're essential to your missions. How would your organization function without your volunteers? If you had fewer drivers, you'd deliver fewer meals for Meals on Wheels. If you didn't have volunteers to do your mailings, you'd do them yourself. It would take away from your other activities, or you'd have to pay for it, and that would lower your bottom line profits. I volunteer at Ollie at Granite State College, and we have volunteers who recruit and choose over 200 classes a term presented by volunteer presenters. And your volunteer board of directors guides your organization to its mission. Where would you be without your volunteers? So let's take a look at who our senior volunteers are. Can we go to the next slide? All right, senior volunteers are age 50 and older. They're people from the silent generation, baby boomers, and the older people of the Gen Xers. They're working people and they're retired people. These generations are shaped by their times. And across the generations, we see changes. We see changes in family dynamics, especially adding women to the workforce. In the labor market, which shifted from agricultural to industrial and now is more service, in technology, and so many more. Almost everything we do today involves computers and electronics, but how many of the silent generation and how many of the baby boomers didn't grow up with this technology? And many of those same people may not have worked outside the house, or if they did, maybe they worked in industry. So our backgrounds that we're bringing to volunteering are vastly different. And a single recruiting, training, motivating, engaging, retention strategy, it's not going to work for all your senior volunteers. One size does not fit all. And not only that, your organizations are different. So what we know, what we talk about today about AARP may not apply to you. AARP New Hampshire, we recruit for a volunteer workforce. As Marc mentioned, he told you all those different types of things our volunteers are called upon to do. You may be recruiting for a small number of people or for a very specific need. AARP has name recognition. We have financial backing. Maybe that's not the same for your organization. So what works for AARP may not work for you, but there is a strategy that works for you. One size does not fit all, so keep that in mind too. And let's go to our next slide. Okay. So what do you do? I want to make sure I'm in the same place. To build and keep our volunteer workforce differs by demographics. But what's unique about the senior volunteer? Why did I volunteer when I was a young adult? Partly because my friends did, partly because my school mandated it. Maybe it looked good on a college application or a resume. As an adult, I probably volunteered with things related to my children, maybe the church, maybe my employer. But we had to fit all that volunteering around our other activities in our lives, our work, our jobs, our family. But why do I volunteer? Why do we volunteer as older adults? I'm going to say a couple of them here. There's a lot of other reasons. To fill a void, to make a difference, to satisfy a passion, or to satisfy a regret of something we didn't do, to give back, to feel useful, to get out of the house and see people. And why don't we volunteer? I'm not going to cover a lot of these. Mary's going to drill down, but we don't volunteer because we don't hear about opportunities, or we can't find the opportunity that we're looking for. Maybe we're afraid. Maybe there's a physical limitation, transportation, or a previous bad experience where we didn't feel part of the team. We didn't feel recognized, that we felt underutilized. We're retired. We have lots of time, right? Well, we do have lots of time, but we fill it. So try calling a senior volunteer one day during the day. You're never going to reach them, at least the people I know. So as you're doing your recruiting, as you're doing your training, plan in advance. Give us plenty of time before we fill our calendars. And then try to offer like multiple dates when you're setting up a recruiting event or a training event, so that if we can't go one day, we can go a different day. And multiple locations, because we may not be able to get to, the seacoast where you're doing something, but we could get here. So we're going to go to the next slide now. And now we're going to start talking about recruiting your senior volunteers. Volunteers are very important to your nonprofit. We already mentioned that. But you know what? They don't magically appear on your doorstep. You need to recruit them. Volunteer recruitment is the process of attracting volunteers to your organization, volunteers who align with the mission of your organization and its values. Do I really need someone who aligns with my values to volunteer for me? Well, not really, but just think, if your volunteer aligns with your values, believes in your organization, they're going to do a better job, and they're going to be happier because they believe in your organization and they believe in what they're doing to benefit your organization. It'll be easier to retain them. When recruiting, remember that seniors don't want to waste time. If you're not ready to talk to them about what you want and what you expect and how they're contributing, you're wasting their time, and they're going to be less likely to want to volunteer for you. So be prepared with job descriptions and volunteer policies. And let's go to the next slide. When recruiting seniors, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is to make the assumption that seniors can't do the job. Cast yourself a wide net. Be very clear about what you want. Don't make your recruiting intimidating, but let the senior decide whether he or she can do that need. Don't make that decision for them before you even try to recruit them. So how should you recruit seniors? Well, you know what to do with recruiting, but consider what motivates seniors and use those when you design your campaigns to hit those triggers. Remember, not all seniors use computers. Not all seniors go on social media. Who are you missing if you only recruit electronically? You have senior volunteers already. Use them to recruit for you. Ask them to reach out to family and friends and bring them aboard. They'll only bring aboard the ones that are good because they don't want to look funny if they bring aboard somebody who's not good. So you're filtering already. And use senior organizations, for example, senior centers or organizations like RSVP. Make your recruiting personal. We're used to an old-fashioned letter. Call us on the phone, meet us in person, send us a letter. And make it fun, because one of the things seniors are looking for is socialization. Can you do an info session with an opportunity to meet and interact? Bring cookies and coffee. Give a tour of your facility. Meet in a park. Do something to make it fun. And where should you recruit? You're going to recruit where seniors will see and hear your campaign. Post recruiting notices at senior centers, that makes sense, senior housing, libraries, maybe houses of worship, and ask if these organizations have newsletters where you can post information. Give presentations about your organization. That's how I got involved with Ollie. Somebody presented at a senior group. But be careful, don't poach other organizations' volunteers when you're doing that. Consider community TV. And maybe you can recruit or post information at events that seniors are likely to attend. Approach the event organizer, ask if you can put out material or be on hand to talk. I know that AARP at one time sponsored an event at the Audi as one of the lecture series. If you have the money and if you need a large number of seniors, that may work. Give out materials when you run events. You make a pitch, we make a pitch at every AARP Speakers Bureau presentation for volunteers. Put something in the local paper. Seniors tend to read local papers. And don't forget, many adults are still working. Maybe you can work with some of those companies to develop those volunteers now and to keep them after they're retired. And what are some effective things that you need to do regarding your materials? Make your materials easily understood. That's not because we don't understand things. It's because we like to get to the point. Make them easy to read. None of that fine print stuff. If it's online material, make it easy to navigate and make it very apparent that it's not a scam. Prepare pamphlets, pamphlet-sized things. And I don't know if I can get these up on the screen, like this, for what your organization is about or what your volunteer program is. Hand them out, put them around town. And make your material catchy. Have a strong and compelling message. Something like, help those in need to get their taxes done for free. With the help of people like you, the AARP Foundation Tax Aid offers free tax assistance to those who need it the most. And very important, remember that recruiting does not end after you put that need out there in the paper. At Ollie, if someone expresses a need and interest in volunteering, I try to reach them immediately. I get on the phone, I call them, I say, let's meet for coffee. Seniors want that immediate and personal interaction. And be prepared to handhold those shaky volunteers. We may want to try something new, but we're also a little bit afraid of failing. So, just take your time with us. All righty, let's go to the next slide because we're going to go on to training. Just getting volunteers through the door is not enough. You need to welcome them. You need to acquaint them with your organization, and you need to train them for the potential role that they're going to perform. It's important for your senior volunteers to understand your organization, to know your rules, to meet with others, to see it's a welcoming place to give their time, and to see how they're contributing. A good volunteer orientation program does this. It empowers volunteers, and empowerment is a strong motivator for seniors. I like an in-person orientation. And I think, especially before COVID, a lot of other older adults did like this. A group orientation works well for older adults because the spotlight's not on one person. It's more social, it's less intimidating. Okay, I recruited, I oriented. What do I do next? It's going to depend on the volunteer function. And the next thing would be training. Training emphasizes learning skills, and for many roles, volunteers need good training. Yeah, a volunteer may not need good training to bake cookies, but they will need some instruction. But for a lot of your stuff, they are going to need training. When I started to volunteer at the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, my role was to process donations, write thank you letters, send thank you letters, file thank you letters in 14 different places. I don't know, whatever they wanted. So I needed to know what they wanted. I needed to understand their campaigns so I could write a good letter. I needed to understand and know how to use the donor management software. And I needed to know their various processes, like we have to scan the letter and put it up in SharePoint. Then my role expanded to be bookkeeping functions. I needed retraining. And I needed all of this to be successful and comfortable and to feel like I was contributing, because if not, why be there? I have plenty of other things I could do with my time. Being successful and comfortable are super important to senior volunteers. If they can't get that from you, they're going to go elsewhere. And what are the key elements to incorporate in training to motivate? I'm trying to move this up, sorry. Explain the relevance of the training. Keep it interesting and social. Provide feedback. Recognize expertise. Don't waste our time. Show appreciation and respect. And consider asking some of your trained volunteers to participate in training. This is going to give your new volunteers confidence. And next slide, please. Yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks, and you can teach an older person new skills or new ways to use current skills. But to be successful in your training, remember, one size does not fit all. Some want to learn in a classroom with peers, with a teacher up front. Some want to hear a concept and try it, and some want the materials in advance so they can look them over so they don't get lost during the training. Some want to do it virtually on their own time and schedule, and others want to learn on the job with a mentor. Some suggestions to successful learning. Adults need to feel the need to learn. It gives us a background. It gives us the relevance of why we're being taught. Adults 50 plus come to you with a variety of personal and professional experience accumulated over several decades. Allow adults to share their previous experience and try to make the connection between their previous experience and their present situation. Studies show that we only retain 20% of what we hear in a setting. So I'm going to go back and repeat this 4 more times so that you get more of it. But anyhow, incorporate discussion, observations, role playing, etc. into your training program to enforce what you're saying. Offer opportunities for hands-on practice. We benefit by working in groups. We learn from each other. And we can be impatient, so get to the core skills and job-related knowledge that we need to know. Our brains need time to absorb. We're better off in multiple short sessions than one 8-hour session of training. And give us breaks. Encourage us to get out of our chairs and walk around, or you're going to have to pry us out of our chairs at the end of the day. And consider pairing new volunteers with experienced mentor volunteers who can show them the ropes. Offer retraining after a volunteer has started so that you can reinforce their jobs, or if their job changed. And over time, if you want to keep a senior volunteer or any volunteer, they may want to take on new things to explore different roles in your organization. These opportunities require retraining as well, so be sure to provide that for new roles or extended responsibilities. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And lastly, I lost my place. Celebrate the end of training, the end of the successful first assignment. Recognize and celebrate all of your volunteers' accomplishments and successes. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who's going to begin her discussion on motivating the senior volunteer.
Wonderful. Thank you, Iris. We have so far identified many of the nuances that come with working successfully with the senior volunteer. I'd like to keep that going and expand on some of those points to discuss motivation, engagement, and retention. Next slide. You'll notice there's a great deal of overlap within these sections because a volunteer who is motivated and engaged is a volunteer whom you retain, regardless of their age. Let's start with motivation. Motivation is the reason behind the action. When it comes to volunteering, there is a lot of action to be a part of. The senior volunteer often has unique motivations for volunteering. Unlike younger volunteers, who may be motivated by duty or looking to gain advantages, the senior volunteer is there because they want to be there. Here is how you can ensure opportunities to motivate. First, focus on passions. The 50+ volunteer will be drawn to organizations that support or involve their passions. While the senior volunteer has worked their whole life, they may be using this time to explore the areas they are interested in or care about deeply, without being tied to any financial dependence. We recommend keeping open communication and learning what your volunteers are passionate about. This can provide opportunity to align passions and make things happen. Socialization is also very important to the 50+ volunteer. Many senior volunteers are no longer working and they may not have kids at home. They're really looking for chances to be out and about, doing something meaningful and connecting with others. Some strategies to increase opportunities for socialization include scheduling meetings to start a few minutes early, especially in the virtual world, so that volunteers can mingle with each other. You can also ensure that most volunteer opportunities are group or partner based, and always allow choice if possible so that volunteers are able to form friendships. And appreciation. I'm sure that you already heard about appreciation and will again later, but appreciation is always motivating, no matter who the volunteer is. Showing appreciation ensures that the volunteers know their worth, and we can tailor how we show our appreciation in order to ensure that we are making a difference with the 50+ volunteer. For example, they will often appreciate a handwritten note over an email. Next slide. Engaging with the 50+ volunteer. There are many different ways to engage with the 50+ volunteer. First, provide opportunities to learn new things, and that way you can focus on the benefits. Always ensure communication and transparency wherever possible. This includes ensuring that your forms of communication have many different facets, such as the phone call versus a text that Iris was talking about earlier. Next slide. Thank you. There are many ways to engage with the volunteers, such as taking advantage of the skills that a 50+ volunteer has to offer. Senior volunteers are often different than others given their extensive life experience. The senior volunteer always has skills. They have years of professional and personal experience that can help you and your mission. Matching someone's skills to their volunteer work can create a flow that's very hard to beat. And second, what comes along with life experience? Connections. The senior volunteer often has established and extensive social networks. These networks can help your organization gain volunteers, take new steps, and reach new people. Part of your engagement with volunteers should be showing interest and helping them to connect their networks to their volunteer work in meaningful ways. Next slide. Keep in mind that when engaging with the senior volunteer, there's no need to be top-down. Often, the senior volunteer has been working in industry for a full career, and they're not looking to volunteer in order to be bossed around. Senior volunteers are going to stay if they are doing things they enjoy, and no one enjoys being ordered around. Senior volunteers often have wonderful ideas for how your organization can flourish, and they want to share and help. Not only does this increase creativity, but volunteers are much more invested in plans that they are a part of. Often, senior volunteers are also looking for the opportunity to be a leader. Remember, they are coming in with skills. Creating a structure which facilitates growth in responsibility and in an open and achievable way is beneficial to everyone. Next slide. As we said before, ensuring a volunteer is motivated and engaged in their work is the most important way to retain them. However, there are other nuances to working with the senior volunteer when it comes to specific strategies. Always remember to show appreciation. This is important for any volunteer, given the nature of the work that we do. But appreciation is so important to anyone donating their time and skills. Remember that a senior volunteer may appreciate that handwritten note more, but every person is different, and the more personalized you can make your appreciation, the better. Another important aspect of retaining the 50+ volunteer is to tailor your communication and training. Iris talked a little bit about this before, but you want to ensure that you're providing lots of opportunities and lots of different forms. This might mean face-to-face meetings versus email, or phone calls versus texting. Your best bet is really to communicate upfront about styles and find out what your volunteer prefers. It's also important to communicate clear paths for growth and ensure that your training is really accessible to the senior volunteer. Like Iris said before, opportunities like hands-on learning rather than a video or smaller, more frequent sessions can make a really big difference. And that way, you have volunteers who understand what their role is, and they're more likely to stay. Paying attention to these needs really helps create success. Next slide. Next, be prepared for your volunteers to get working. You want to make sure that you are ready to give them something to do. It can be really discouraging for volunteers to show up and not have anything to do, or to have to take over someone else's role without notice. If your senior volunteer is there for you, they're ready to go. You'll also want to ensure a range of opportunities. A path for growth and responsibility can be key for a volunteer who wants to lead. But it's also important to create a range of opportunities within the work that you offer. For example, at AARP New Hampshire, we have some offerings that are virtual and some that are in person. We have some opportunities that are behind the scenes, such as event registration, or some that are public facing, like a speaker's position. You can notice our wonderful volunteers here today. The senior volunteer often wants to try something new, so lots of space ensures that you can retain these dynamic volunteers. I will now hand our presentation over to Mary Roberge, and she will be speaking in detail about some of the barriers that exist while working with the senior volunteer and strategies for overcoming these.
Great. So thank you, Iris and Ashley. Iris and Ashley touched upon some of the barriers during their discussion that can prevent the 50+ from volunteering for your organization. And it's not just the 50+ too, because sometimes these barriers can apply to volunteers of all ages. Volunteers are diverse, not only in their background and skills, but they do come from all age groups. Sunny Fader, who has a book titled 365 Ideas for Recruiting, Retaining, Motivating, and Rewarding Your Volunteers, noted an AARP study of Americans between the ages of 44 and 79. And they titled this demographic as the experienced generation. And then there was a 2005 nationwide study by the Corporation for National and Community Service with the U.S. Census Bureau, an independent sector, that found that 15.5 million people ages 12 to 18 contributed more than 1.3 billion volunteer service hours. And Marc will be discussing a little bit later about intergenerational volunteering, but I think the numbers are pretty impressive. Next slide, please. So we're all eager to volunteer, especially the 50+, but there are some reasons why the 50+ volunteer will not choose to volunteer for your organization, or they may decide after a while they no longer want to volunteer for your organization. And some of these barriers, as mentioned before, are the perception of the 50+ volunteers' ability, communication, technology, time commitments, training, lack of appreciation, and lack of empowerment. So let's talk a little bit about perception. Perception is that as people age, the 50+ cannot do certain tasks, or they can't take on certain responsibilities because they're too old and they don't understand. Some of these perceptions include technology with the platforms such as Zoom, Skype, Teams, or just using a computer or texting. The use of social media, some people don't like it, or how things work. What is the process for doing the volunteer work? Or not being flexible, not being adaptable to change. Volunteers come from all varied backgrounds, and they all have different skill sets that can be beneficial to your organization. So we need to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about communication. everyone does have a preferred way of how they want to communicate. This should be taken into consideration when you are collaborating with your volunteers. A few years ago, as a volunteer with AARP New Hampshire, I got involved in a communication project, and the purpose was to enhance communication between the staff and the volunteers. What we wanted to know was how staff communicated with volunteers, how volunteers communicated with staff, and how volunteers communicated with each other. So we learned that people like to communicate using their phone, email, text, or the organization's newsletter, or the organization's communication system. AARP has a communication system called the Portal with chatter groups that are similar to Facebook. They have libraries with useful information, training, and reimbursements. I also volunteer for the Palace Theater, and they use a volunteer system called VIC, which allows the volunteer ushers to sign up for assignments and emails to communicate meetings and request for additional help for various shows. So there are volunteers who also like all the forms of communication. So it's just important to kind of find out what works and how you can get your, how the volunteers want to get their assignments and the messages. And this helps to make the volunteer feel that they're in the know and that they are aware of what the organization's goals and what the various opportunities are. Next slide, please. Oh, technology. Let's talk a little bit about technology. There are volunteers who are not comfortable using Zoom, and it doesn't matter what your age is, or they don't like using Skype or Teams for meetings, or to even use volunteering for virtual events. They may be on a computer all day, and when they get home, they don't want to look at a computer or go to a virtual meeting. And each platform has its own unique format, which can create challenges, connecting, learning how to use it, and all those other wonderful things. Some volunteers only have a landline, or they do have a cell phone, but it's not a smartphone, or their computer is old and it's very slow performing. And I do fall into that category because my computer sometimes is so slow, I could do a little dance, but I did finally decide to upgrade a little bit. Next slide, please. The senior volunteer doesn't want to feel that he or she is committed to a 40-hour week or more, or a set schedule. They want to pick and choose. So whether they're still working or they're retired or semi-retired, they want time and they want flexibility. They want to be able to travel. They want to see different countries, experience different cultures. They want to attend a family or a neighborhood friend's athletic game, play, dance, or go to a dance recital or a graduation. They want to be involved in what their grandchildren or their neighbors' children are doing. Some our volunteers that are 50 plus are involved in caregiving, and so that role needs to be taken into consideration. And finally, we say we're going to retire and we're going to participate in all the hobbies that we never got a chance to do during our busy work lives. So we want to play golf, or we take exercise classes, join book clubs, or other fun activities. The volunteer wants to manage their own time. Next slide, please. Volunteers are eager and they want to do their very, very best for your organization. Trainings, which was touched upon, not only provide the nuts and bolts of how to do their assignments, but training helps the volunteers to grow. And so when I talk about the nuts and bolts, I mean showing the volunteer how to do the task or how to take on a volunteer role. What the volunteer thinks of how something should be done can actually be quite different from what the organization has in mind. So it's really important to make sure that they understand how things need to be done and that they're trained in doing that. Give your volunteers the opportunity to learn new concepts. If they don't keep on learning, they're going to walk away. One of the reasons that I put in a lot of time for AARP New Hampshire is because it has provided me with the opportunity to learn. my motto as an AARP New Hampshire volunteer is that AARP helps you to grow. And that's why I continue to volunteer for this organization. Next slide, please. So in addition to volunteering with an organization whose mission, vision, and motto aligns with them, volunteers want to feel that their contributions are worthwhile to the overall benefit of the organization. They do want to feel appreciated, and they do want respect for their ideas. These are all things that Ashley has mentioned before. If the volunteer does not feel appreciated, the volunteer will walk away. Next slide. So Jonathan McKee, with his son Thomas, wrote a book titled The New Breed, and they wrote about the importance of empowering volunteers. These authors indicated that volunteers prefer to be knowledge workers who can make decisions and who can be part of the decision-making process. And this is nothing new as to what a volunteer did during their working life. Empowerment can take many forms based on what the organization's guidelines are, or as we call them in AARP, the guardrails. Empowerment relies on effective communication and collaboration between the volunteer and staff and the volunteer and volunteer together. In other words, two volunteers working as a team. Empowerment gives the volunteer ownership for their assignments. If the volunteer does not feel this independence, you're going to lose the volunteer. And at this point, I want to turn this presentation over to Marc, who's going to be telling us about the benefits of the 50+ volunteer. Marc?
I am so proud of myself that I took myself off mute. This is a rare occasion. Hey, I got to tell you people, after listening to Iris's, birth poll, I'm supposed to be talking about how the 50+ volunteer benefits your organization. I think I'm speaking to the choir here because I think many of you are there. But anyway, I'm going to do it. So let's start with someone I think we all know. He's a senior now who grew up in England. This beat Paul McCartney's look at retirement when he was in his teenage years. Now, I will refrain from singing. When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, you can knit a sweater by the fireside. Sunday morning, go for a ride. Doing the garden, digging the weeds. Who could ask for more when I'm 64? Now, Paul turned 64 in 2006, so that puts him really close to 80. And I can guarantee you he has a new view on the 64 to 80 year of age individual, which I would also say the smart organizations have already done this. Now, I think we touched upon the slides earlier in this presentation. As a former educator, probably one of the main educational teaching tools is reinforcing. So you're probably going to hear things that have already been said, but please bear with me. An initiative of the Robert N. Butler Columbia Age Center, The Advantages of Older Workers. Older workers are skilled and experienced. It's been said that the older workers bring a level of experience, critical thinking, and sheer knowledge that cannot be taught. And I know many of you know that. They tend to be dependable. They stay on their jobs assignments longer, and they take fewer days off. They have a strong work ethic, and they retain a business knowledge and network. Now, probably one of the biggest issues about the senior volunteer is technology. Well, you would be amazed. Seniors do know technology. And if you're running a good organization for the seniors who may have phobias or have difficulty, you're going to provide a training program or support to help them, and they will jump right on. Next slide, please. Diversity. Now, when I talk diversity, there are many diversities. I'm going to talk about age diversity. But before I do that, I'd like to share with you the Volunteer New Hampshire vision. Volunteer New Hampshire envisions our state as a place where people volunteer together to build strong and connecting communities. We bring our vision to life by engaging those communities to solve local challenges through volunteerism. And older volunteers prove the best teams are intergenerational. There is evidence that mixed age teams in workplaces, there's evidence that mixed age teams in the workplace are more productive than teams of workers of the same age. This is Zarek Goebel Fries in 2013. Older volunteers play a critical role in training the next generation of volunteers. Can we go to slide 40? What is intergenerational experience? In North America, the term intergenerational program is used to refer to those activities or programs which increase cooperation, interaction, and exchanges between people of different generations, enabling them to share their talents and resources and support each other in relationships that benefit both them and the organization they are volunteering. On slide 41. Now, I had your birth poll. Now you can take that information and look at my slide here and see where you fit. Now, what are the ages of the generations in 2022? If you do some research, you'll find that dates overlap and names vary. While we hear generational terms all the time, the definitions are not official. However, based on widespread consensus, these are the birth years and the age of the generations you'll want to use in 2021. Now, have you found your generation? I would be Boomers 1. And I think we have many other watching on Boomer 1. Can we go to slide 42? Why is intergenerational bonding important? Establishing intergenerational relationships allow both groups to learn about each other's differences and similarities while building relationship capacity and a sense of fulfillment. Intergenerational programs connect diverse groups and networks and help dispel stereotypes. Slide 37. Six quick benefits of volunteering for seniors. I know you already heard some. First of all, it's good for the seniors' mental health. There have been studies that said that if you are active, your mental health is improved. It prevents loneliness and isolation, which is a major issue with seniors in this state and all through this country. It gives them a feeling of purpose. As we grow older, many senses of purpose tend to fade away. It helps one to make new friends. It increases physical activities for the individual, and it helps the individual learn new skills. Now, slide 38. How seniors benefit your organization. It's a two-way street. The organization is helping the senior, but the senior is helping the organization. They have experience and community ties, many of these volunteers. The Volunteer Center of Cedar Valley found senior volunteers were a great resource for the local community. People who have spent their entire lives in an area have multiple contacts and know plenty about regional politics. And if you're running an organization, you might want to tap into that. Also, they have unique schedules. If you look at your whole volunteer group, many of them are in school or they work from 9 to 5. Who works from 9 to 5 now, right? And the seniors, they have more hours. They are available from that 9 to 5 point. You know, the joke is retirees usually have plenty of time on their hands. That's a fallacy. Retirees are keeping themselves busy, but they also are looking for something that will motivate them and have a purpose. Seniors interested in nonprofit opportunities can see where they are most needed, and they will know they are an integral piece of that organization. Slide 39, making volunteer opportunities accessible. There are three very important factors to remember when recruiting older volunteers. First, as you know, they want to make a difference. 2, older volunteers are not afraid of commitment when there's a payoff. This payoff could be your cause or a benefit to the community. And your seniors want flexibility. They are often on the go, and very rarely can you tie them down. Now, questions organizations must ask themselves: did the organization maintain an age-inclusive environment where everyone feels engaged and respected? Have you identified the place and methods to facilitate your message? Outreach is critical to finding qualified volunteer candidates. To appeal to adults age 50 plus, make it clear that your organization is interested in their talent, skills, knowledge, judgment, patience, persistence, and reliability. Does your onboard and training meet the needs and preference of your volunteer pool? Adults 50 plus walk in the door with skills, approaches, networks, and a variety of personal and professional experiences. And your plan for retaining this talent begins on day 1, as was said earlier. Design your training program to acknowledge and leverage what new team members already know in order to build a foundation for new skills. And last but not least, do you offer opportunities for collaboration, leadership, and personal growth to help entice the integrated adult age 50 plus? Well, let's go to slide 43. This is one of my favorites. Well, not the slide, but anyways, leadership for age inclusion. Leadership based on learnings, don'ts, and do's. Avoid assumptions, such as don't assume that millennials will want to work on your organizational website. Don't assume that mature volunteers will want to sit and fold envelopes. Do make, as you heard many times, make volunteering interesting and fun. And do offer as many choices and opportunities for personalization of the volunteer role as possible. And now the grand finale, we're at conclusion. And now we have another cloud question for you. And you know what the first one is? Well, we're going to check your retention span because it's the same question. What word now comes to your mind when you hear the phrase senior volunteer?
So we've got some words coming up here.
Kind of deja vu, huh?
Yeah. I think we might have some in the chat. Oh, somebody wrote committed, appreciation. Okay, a couple of people are putting them in the chat. These are great words.
Well, I thank you for that. And I speak for all the 50 plus in New Hampshire. Now, let's do a quick review. Anybody has any questions or comments based on this presentation? This is your floor right now. Anything in the chat room? Well, let me tell you, as a former educator, I love it when I ask that question and no one responds. Because normally it's always the opposite.
Somebody wrote that this was extremely thorough, and thank you. So that is awesome. What term should we use other than the word senior or elder? That's a good question.
You know, I'm probably the worst person to ask. One of our presenters, Iris, Mary, Ashley, would you like to respond to that?
Iris looked like she was going to say something. I could say what I have been, what's been suggested to me. It's not to say elder, but most people don't seem to mind senior, or we at AARP often say 50 plus just because it's a fact versus a label. And I mean, I would always think don't hesitate to ask somebody if they have a preference, depending on what group you're working with, who you're working with. Everybody's different, just like no matter what the age group. So always shows a little bit of respect just to ask what people prefer.
And let me tell you, what's a true tell is look at the body language to the person you're talking to. If they're offended by what you said, you're going to see it right away. And hopefully they'll let you know.
I vote for exhausted.
Okay, can I move on? I've been practicing this ending for weeks.
Yes, I don't believe there's anything else in the chat. So yes.
Before I go, hopefully they're going to put our phone number. If you have any questions, please, or any comment, just let us know, and we would appreciate it. AARP has a wealth of information for all your organizations on seniors, and you may want to tap into that. This concludes our program today, the Senior Volunteer, the Hidden Workforce. On behalf of Iris, Mary, Ashley, and myself, I would like to thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed and learned something about the Senior Volunteer today. If you would like additional information, again, give us a call. We would love to share it with you. In closing, we would like to especially thank Michaela Collins and the entire staff from Volunteer New Hampshire, along with some superstars that you're looking at right now, Carrie, Joan, Emily, and Aislinn. I mean, you were wonderful to work with. If any of you ever want to do a program at Volunteer New Hampshire, they take good care of you. So please enjoy the rest of the 2022 Governor's Conference on Volunteerism. Hey, and don't forget, the last session on Thursday, the 12th, trivia and reflection from 12:30 to 1:45. I've heard there will be prizes. Thank you again.